Who's in the NFL here? You? You? How about you, Tim? You, Tim.
CTBK gives executives and owners of mid-market businesses unparalleled confidence and clarity so you can focus on strategic objectives and organizational success. Their multidisciplinary advisors, accountants, and team members have a wealth of experience and are all available and responsive to each client to ensure the most effective advice, actions, and outcomes no matter the situation or complexity level. That experience base and one-team approach, combined with integrated and efficient way of operating, enable them to be truly proactive partners, doing the best thing for their client every time. Visit ctbk.com or call 716-630-2400 to learn how CTBK can work for you.
And now, back to the man who puts the heart in shart. It's Tim Graham and friends.
The Buffalo Bills will open their semi-unobstructed preseason Saturday, 1 p.m. at Highmark Stadium against the Carolina Panthers. But we are going to start off with some Sabres news. They have an EBUG. We're going to get to that and so much more here on Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants. I'm Tim Graham of The Athletic, here with Jonah Bronstein of Bronstein Sports Plus. And while you're here and we have your attention right away, please subscribe, comment, rate, like, do all the things that you can to please engage with Tim Graham and Friends. And if you're watching on the YouTube channel or your podcast platform of choice, please click on the link to Homage. Homage Apparel Company has great merchandise officially licensed by the NFL, Major League Baseball, NBA, WNBA, WWE, Grateful Dead, Peanuts, Marvel, Topps, all kinds of pop culture brands and crossovers galore, video game lines, all this type of stuff. Go check, click that link. And as long as you stay within that link, do all your shopping, you get discounts, bundle up this, bundle up that, and you are supporting Tim Graham and Friends. Jonah, I just want to start with the Sabres announcing their emergency backup goaltender. Now, the NHL is calling it the emergency replacement goaltender, but EBUG is just, I think, more entertaining to say. And to have an EBUG, we're probably never going to see this guy on the ice, but it's a new thing within the NHL. Every team must have one. And the Sabres have named their guy Jack McNaughton. We're going to tell you a little bit about him. But the other thing regarding his title, not only is he the emergency replacement goaltender, but he's also going to be a goaltending scout for the Sabres, which makes sense. You want this guy to have a job in addition to just waiting around, tapping his foot, seeing if he's going to two guys to get hurt, in some cases, three guys to get hurt. But Jonah, that's something that I think every NFL team should have, a quarterback scout. Even the Bills right now with Josh Allen, they should constantly be scouting quarterbacks at all times, whether you're looking for your franchise guy or the best backup, or you should have the position is so precious that you should have as many eyes analyzing, looking for quarterbacks, looking for goaltenders. Anyway, Jack McNaughton, we'll tell you a little bit about him. But the criteria for the EBUG is you must have not played an NHL game under any standard contract. So you cannot have been an NHL player at any point. You have to have fewer than 80 professional games played in your career, and you cannot have played any professional hockey within the previous 3 seasons. So it's not like the Sabres could make Colton Ellis their EBUG for the year. It has to be somebody who meets all this criteria. Jack McNaughton has not played any professional hockey based on the record that I see here at hockeydb.com. He played in the juniors, in the World Hockey League, or the World Hockey League, the Western Hockey League with the Calgary Hitmen. And then he has been with the University of Western Ontario for the past 4 seasons. He is 20. He will be 25 in October. And that's your EBUG. And I think it's a good excuse to talk a little Sabres before we talk about the Bills preseason.
Yeah, I am thoroughly impressed at how much you were able to talk about this announcement. Just
It's
less
fun,
than an
isn't
hour
it?
after it's been made.
I mean, Ryan Vins was fun,
isn't it?
Ryan Vins, the people wear Ryan Vins jerseys, and I mean, it's kind of the story of the guy who played for was it the Calgary Flames a few years ago? He's a guy who used to, just absorb shots from the Toronto Marlies and was the Zamboni driver up in Toronto. I mean, there have been these cool stories, and Jack McNaughton might be the next Sabres folk hero.
Yeah, it is fun when the emergency goaltender gets into a game. It's kind of a quirk of hockey and kind of neat when that happens and it shows up on SportsCenter NHL Network. I don't think it's very fun when it's your team and you're kind of thrust into that position. The Sabres are actively trying to avoid having their emergency goaltender on the ice, at least in a game situation. Jarmo Kekalainen had mentioned that's part of the calculus on continuing with the 3 goaltender rotation. Although within a game, you can't bring a third goaltender off the bench, but on a road trip or going into a game, a warm-up injury, they might be able to swap in the third goaltender if he's on the active roster and avoid having to put in the ERG, if you will. I don't know if you find this funny at all. You probably don't. But about 10, 15 years ago, maybe even longer than that, when I first heard the word EBUG used, I thought EBUG was an electronic goaltending device that you could use in like practice or if you really got stuck in a game that just kind of simulated the average goaltender and blocked off certain part of the night. It's almost like a artificial intelligence type thing. And maybe that is what NHL teams should use. And then to get back to your original point, yeah, I do think EBUG is part of the lexicon of hockey now, and changing the name of that, I wouldn't necessarily agree with. And I think you could get a really good homage shirt out of, like Snoopy and Sabres
Absolutely.
goaltending gear with EBUG on it. Maybe our friends at Homage, if they're listening to this, can take that idea, and then I'd buy one, I'd wear it.
I was picturing the guy in red. It was not the Calgary Flames. I've reacquainted myself with the story of the 42-year-old Zamboni driver, David Ayers, Ayres, and he got a win, 6-3 victory. And it was just anyway, just Google it. It's great. The video out there. He did really well. And the Hurricanes just surrounded him with defense all night, but they still scored 6 goals. So anyways, it's just one of the great NHL stories.
Should more sports have this kind of role on the team where you get
No, it's
a
ridiculous.
semi-pro, almost amateur that has to get thrust into the game?
I think that the reason the NHL has gone to this is because it is an embarrassment. It is like a minor league type situation where like Air Bud would occur, or Francis, the field goal kicking mule, or whatever it was, that old Disney movie. Like, come on. We don't, it is the story, every maybe kid, when they fall in love with sports before they go to bed at night, imagines himself running out in the field as the emergency quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys or something. And there's movies on it, right? There's baseball movies, The Rookie, whatever. I mean, but yeah, no, but it's stupid.
Yeah.
I mean, it's stupid that this would happen because it just really lessens your sport. But if you're going to have this quirk, then at least let's have fun with this quirk. I do. You raised the point about Jarmo Kekalainen and the insulation that is involved here. So first off, that's probably why the Sabres have a guy has 0 professional NHL or professional, not NHL, because you can't have any NHL experience, but you can have the guy can have a pretty extensive NHL background. 80 professional games for a goaltender could be over the course of 4 seasons, 5 seasons. That means you're with a team, you're practicing every day, you're sharp, taking shots from NHL players or NHL, even AHL caliber players, guys who could be NHL players someday. The Sabres have just gone totally out of that. They have to have an EBUG. They're going with a guy who had no shot to play in the NHL. He was never drafted into the NHL, Jack McNaughton. So it looks like he was even a backup in the juniors and even in college. So they have this guy that they want. But it'll be interesting to see what other teams do, because they might want to invest in a quality EBUG, or as quality as you can have in terms of experience. But with Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, with Alex Lyon, with Colton Ellis, it's insulated that much more on the road. But one of those guys has to be scratched. So even in an in-game situation, Jack McNaughton could play. Now, if they're on the road and Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen gets hurt at the morning skate, then, or in warm-ups, that type of stuff, then you can position and say, okay, UPL, you're scratched tonight. We're going to address the other two. But if it only, the 3 goaltender approach that the Sabres look like they're going to go with this year would only help if it happens outside of the 60 minutes of the game, or actually within the time it takes to turn in your lineup for the game with your healthy scratches. Anyways, it's interesting. I don't know how much more time we want to spend on it, but any other goaltending thoughts, Jonah, regarding the Sabres?
I wonder if
our hook.
If Tre'Davious White continues to go unsigned by an NFL club, if he could show up as some team's emergency goaltender. And then on a more serious note, well, not serious, but why can't the NHL do like what the NFL does with quarterbacks? They have the kind of emergency quarterback situation where your third quarterback is on the roster and available to play if needed, but can't go in unless the other 2 goaltenders get hurt. That would seem to make more sense.
Money. It's an extra. You'd have to pay him probably a minimum salary, an NHL minimum salary. Anything that goes towards the pension or the union, like for seasons accrued or service. Like Jack McNaughton is not ever going to get service as an NHL player because he's not on the roster. But the other guy, even if you had the emergency third quarterback, like he's still on the roster and he still gets credit for every accrued seasons, towards his contract, towards all kinds of benefits. So probably just that, probably simple penny pinching in a league that really doesn't, they don't have the contract, the television contracts that NFL does. In fact, I saw the stats from the Hall of Fame game. It was a pretty good game, by the way, but the Hall of Fame game just last Thursday or Friday, whatever it was. And the rating was higher than any NHL game last year, including the Stanley Cup. It is just, people love football so much, but it's just another reminder that the money just isn't there for, I mean, they're turning profits, don't get me wrong, but just the ability to spend money like the NFL and have a third quarterback and have all these luxuries, other leagues just can't do it. Or they choose not to. They probably still could and turn. It's not like they're going to stop turning a profit, but and maybe the union doesn't want it either, because hey, that's less money that's going to go towards a guy who's actually going to play. And for our salary cap purposes, how would that affect salary cap? Could you pay a guy outside? Would he count towards the cap? Probably. But if he didn't, then that would be an end around to stash a guy.
I mean, I think you're right that this is part of the equation, but the percentage of total NHL payroll that's going much higher in recent years that would be devoted to this position, and it would probably be some kind of 2-way contract type situation where you'd make a certain lower salary when you weren't playing and maybe compensated higher when you did get into the game. I don't think it would put the NHL out of business or really affect the bottom line. And having some of these really unprepared, unqualified goaltenders in the net might hurt the product more than the NHL would want. I also think, what if, because sometimes an emergency quarterback is a position player, or I always like kind of in baseball when a position player has to go in and pitch for a little while. That's kind of fun. So maybe your 6th or 7th defenseman has to throw on the pads and get into the net if you get into that emergency situation. And again, that would be a tough situation for that team, and not the most competitive answer to this is the question, but might also be fun to see, a player who's not used to playing goaltender, but is a professional hockey player, trying to make saves and make stops and figure it out on the fly.
David Ayers. I'm trying to find the box score. I don't know. I just wanted to wrap that up before we move on to the Bills, but I was trying to find the box score to see exactly how many saves he made. Eight. Well, he let in 2 goals on 10 shots, but Hurricanes scored 6. So he came away with, I think he was the number 1 star of the game, which is ceremonial anyway, but cool, whatever.
I would like to see, because this gentleman, forgetting his name, the new EBUG for the Sabres,
Jack McNaughton.
Jack McNaughton, his own scouting evaluation of himself. Because he's the goaltending scout. I'd like to read his scouting report on how qualified he is to, maybe if Colton Ellis had a long-term injury or something like that, if how qualified he is to actually be a rostered goaltender in the NHL, in his own opinion.
Yeah, that would be good to see. There's probably a file somewhere if he's had to do one himself. Interesting stuff on the Homage site as we switch over to Bills. I was remiss not to mention the Homage shirt that I'm wearing now, Little King's Beer, which I'm still trying to find locally. It was from my youth, one of the first beers I ever stole sips of, and they sold in 8-packs, splits, green bottles. It went out of business. It's a Cincinnati beer, but I do recall them being in national commercial campaigns back in the 70s, probably early 80s. And anyways, I've been going to some of these bars that pride themselves on having a lot of different types of beers from a lot of different places. I haven't been able to find it. I was even in Cleveland a couple of weeks ago, and they didn't know what I was talking about. But it's a Cincinnati beer. It does exist. If you're out there, Brian Cummings has tried to help me out. I guess there's some crazy beer superstore in Batavia I need to go try. But if you're out there, out and about, and you know where Little Kings might be in Buffalo, shoot me a note and let me know. But anyways, so I'm at the Homage site right now, just scrolling. I wanted to see if they had any Highmark Stadium stuff. There's a great Rich Stadium shirt, which Jonah has worn on this, but they have so much retro stuff on here. The red helmet, you want that red helmet? You're so upset about that Nickel City helmet. They do have a Bills retro red helmet t-shirt that looks pretty cool. It's like the old typeface and everything. And how about these crossovers? You have NBA Jam, which is NFL Jam. Josh Allen and James Cook are the two for the Bills version. There's a crossover with the Grateful Dead, Beavis and Butthead, Peanuts, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, The Simpsons, Tecmo Bowl. I don't know, is Tecmo Bowl a crossover? I guess not, because that's staying within the NFL category. Onesies, gym shorts, hoodies, starter jackets. Anyways, cool stuff over there. What are you looking for, Jonah, in the preseason game against the Carolina Panthers Saturday, 1 p.m.?
Probably the sideline gear that the coaches and the inactive players are wearing, and how,
if it's any homage.
Yeah, if it's Homage branded or if it's not as good as the Homage branded stuff. What am I watching? What player to watch? Well, the Bills have 91 players on the roster, and maybe 10, 11 of them won't play due to the injuries, but the rest of them will be out there. So there's a lot to watch. I've been asked quite often which player I'll be watching, and I don't know if I'll be locking my focus on any single one player for the entire game. My answer
I
to
will
that
say
question,
this. I like Joe Brady's decision to play the starters. Normally I wouldn't. And if it was last year, if Joe Brady was a first-time head coach, I would say skip it. These guys know what they're doing. And even if you need to feel your way through the season opener, okay, fine. It's about injuries. It's about preservation. But I do think that this year is significant with the new stadium. And we know that professional athletes and coaches are creatures of habit. And we may roll our eyes at the idea of routine being important. But if they think it's important, then it is important. The Bull Durham speech to Annie Savoy about Nuke LaLoosh and his streak. If he believes it, then that is what you must honor. And these guys need to get ready to go. They need to find out how they want to warm up. You don't want Josh Allen getting ready for Highmark Stadium and getting used to this new venue, this new home, with the idea that he's going to be wearing untied, unlaced sneakers on the sideline as soon as the game starts, with his hands in the shoulder pads with a ball cap on. You want him ready to go as though he's playing a game, even if it's for a series. Get properly warmed up, go through proper pregame, take all your snaps, do as you would for 1 o'clock Sunday in the regular season. Get a routine going. When we exit the locker room, when we, where you want to be, where the trainer's room is to get your pregame work done, or the bicycle to help you get all these things that are going to be in different places. Go learn your surroundings as best you can, and then shelve them for the game in Cleveland. And then the last preseason game, you don't need to worry about that either. But I like the routine aspect of anybody who can play should be playing, at least or the starters should start for this game.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I do think some of that's overstated in the sense that the Bills will play a full regular season game in Houston in week 1 before playing that first home game. So a lot of that getting acclimated and working out the kinks. And yeah, there's different things with the lights, and Josh Allen said where the play clock's located. But Josh Allen will be in regular season mode by the time the Bills play a real game in the stadium, because that first home game is week 2. But, and I was asked this question earlier in the week. My answer was Josh Allen, and people kind of scoffed at me like, "Oh, Josh Allen's not going to play. He shouldn't play. You shouldn't be encouraging this crazy behavior by the Buffalo Bills." But I believe that, if you're going to stage this game and put it on television and sell tickets and act like it's somewhat of a real football game, that the real football players should play at least a bit. And, it's a rather new phenomenon that star quarterbacks sit out the entire preseason. They used to be years ago, I think they played a lot more than they do now. And in recent vintage, it was, there was kind of a rhythm to it. It was a couple series in game 1,
It was a
couple
build-up.
series in game 2, the first half of game 3, didn't play game 4. It was kind of understood that the starters rest, and they still do usually in the third preseason game. But I like the idea of getting the football players out there for the fan experience, the social contract of there's a lot of kids that are going to be going to this preseason game that don't go to regular season games, or at their first game and are too young to understand the nuances of preseason football, and will be quite disappointed if they show up to a Buffalo Bills game and Josh Allen isn't the quarterback on the field. So I think it's good that he's going to be out there in uniform, warming up, and at least pretending to play football for a few snaps. I think there's ways that you can prevent your quarterback from getting hurt. Oh, by the way, Josh Allen has the longest consecutive start streak in the NFL, so he's shown some durability. And I think I don't think the Bills maybe want Josh Allen to take any hits in the preseason, but isn't that part of what preseason football and even training camp is about, is acclimating to the physicality of the game and the first big hit of the season? Josh Allen shouldn't get sacked in week 1 in Houston and have that be the first time he's felt, another man on his body
That's
since
true.
the Denver game.
And based on what happened last year, he's going to get hit a lot by the Houston Texans defense, which may have gotten better since the last time they played. I always forget exactly how many sacks. I think it was 8,
I think it
7
was
or
9,
8,
but
but
yeah,
I know
something like that.
it was 12 quarterback hits. And that's not the hurries. That's not the run plays where he got hit. That was a massacre down there. So yeah, he's going to need to be toughened up, tenderized. You got to tenderize that meat, get him ready to go.
And they don't get that in practice. Other players get a
That's
little
right.
bit of that in practice, but quarterbacks do not.
Oh, if you were to touch Josh Allen at a Bills practice, you would, Alec Anderson would probably rip your eyes out of their sockets. And it'll be the same next week against the Browns. The quarterbacks are off limits. No touching the quarterbacks. But I think that's going to be an interesting dynamic. Browns versus Bills in a full contact practice next Thursday in Berea, Ohio. And The reason being is that these are two teams that are under pressure, and the Bills have had a pretty frustrating training camp with the weather. And yes, they're going to get some of it out of their system Saturday afternoon against the Carolina Panthers. But I mean, these are guys, they've been fighting in practice. They've been a little wound up. Yes, it's supposed to be loose, but they also seem like they're ready to go. They need to be held back a little bit. So once they get against the Cleveland Browns, a team that is under a lot of pressures too, with their quarterback situation, and they're kind of in sell mode. They get rid of Myles Garrett. Those are players who know what their expectations are this year, and it's to lose. They're going to lose a lot. They won't, maybe even with Shadur Sanders and Deshaun Watson on the roster. This is a team that would love to get Arch Manning and then move on from some of these other guys. But all the drama that surrounds the Browns, I think that they're going to probably be chippy against the Glory Boys, probably the Browns in their minds. Here come these Super Bowl contenders. I get to make my mark. I'm a young player in the league. Maybe, in fact, I wouldn't be on any other team in the NFL, but I got a shot to stick with the Cleveland Browns. And if I can make an impression in practice on Thursday against a former NFL MVP or the NFL rushing champ and this line and all that, then hey, I'm not gonna hold back. So that's an interesting. That could be interesting next week.
Yeah, and it is interesting. What I don't like from the NFL fan perspective is that sometimes teams get as much what they want out of these joint practices and the looks and the reps and things like that, that they will later decide to play the starters or the key players even less in the second preseason game when they play each other again. That they almost kind of play that preseason game in practice and then go to a secondary plan for the preseason game. And because the practice isn't open to fans or televised, I think that hurts the appeal of the preseason game. But also, as much as I do believe that the starters and the star football players should participate in preseason football and play maybe a quarter of the game and be out there a little bit, I also understand that a large function of the preseason is for the second and third teamers to play to prove their worth on the roster, the position battles, and get tape on film that allows them to be re-signed to practice squads and things like that. And that's actually the most intriguing aspect of preseason football. But I think it's really difficult, or you really have to kind of go through the roster with a fine-tooth comb to predict everything that's going to happen in there. It's kind of, you watch the preseason game, watch all the players, watch all the plays, and then analyze, who stands out or who does not perform up to expectations, and analyze that after the preseason game. I think after the preseason game, we're going to be talking a lot more about second and third team players on the Bills than the starters.
And really no surprises on the Bills depth chart that they are required to produce before any preseason game or any regular season game for that matter. They're supposed to update it, but this is not under oath. Teams don't have to, this isn't a, what do you call it when it's a private interrogation
Affidavit.
Affidavit, but you hear, Bill Clinton with his, Bill Clinton and Trump's Adam. What do you call it? I mean, it's when they, I don't know. I'm drawing a blank. But anyway, the Bills can't perjure themselves with their depth chart. They can lie all they want. And some teams will even put co-starters in there to fudge it even more. So we didn't learn anything from the Bills too deep. In fact,
I wouldn't say
they put out 12 positions on each side of the ball. So
yeah, they do that every week though.
Right, because there's a fullback and a nickelback. But
I wouldn't say no surprises or we learned nothing. I think there were some mild surprises in the depth chart if we believe this is really how the Bills view their players and the ranking of their players right now. I think there was some surprise that Keon Coleman was listed ahead of Josh Palmer as the other outside receiver, second or third receiver, depending on how you want to slot that in the Bills offense. Fadarian Mathis being ahead of Dwayne Carter as the second team nose tackle was something I think, at least in the media, not everybody was expecting, because it seems like Dwayne Carter was higher up in that rotation in early training camp practices. And I was not surprised by Alec Anderson being the left guard. I think it's always been his job to lose, and I think he's always been earmarked to be the week one starter. And Austin Corbett is here for insurance and depth and can play the position if Alec Anderson falls on his face. But I think he'll get the opportunity there. But some people have predicted that Austin Corbett would win that training camp battle, and he has practiced with the first teamers. I think you might see him as the first team guard for week two of the preseason as the Bills go through that process of determining the new starter at that position. Uh, but, as you mentioned, this isn't a sworn statement. The Bills could line up differently, put players in the game in different orders as the game is played. The depth chart isn't a predictive tool as much as some people want it to be. Not
Depth is,
having an or there for left guard or any other positions, punter, where they haven't determined a starter is not, I wouldn't call it a surprise, but I think it was something that had the Bills done that, it would have looked rather normal compared to, kind of, did the Bills give us any intel on who is going to win those positions with this depth chart, or should we not read too much into that?
yeah, I think they seem to go with the veteran. And, it's kind of like there was deference given. By the way, deposition is the word I was looking for, regarding being interrogated or interviewed under oath, maybe not on the witness stand, but in private between your attorneys and an investigator. But yeah, and no, I didn't. I just didn't. I just feel like it was courtesies that were being done in terms of, all right, you're the veteran. Maxwell Hairston listed as the starter. And he's probably not even going to play, right? So Davison Igbinosun was behind him. Also, when it comes to receivers, they list 3 receiver slots, and they don't put in. They just list the guys from left to right, and it does. So you might be second behind. Joshua Palmer might be, or whoever's third behind one guy. Anyways, they don't put the true who would be the backup in this situation on that list.
Another thing, I don't know exactly how this works at the NFL level, but I do understand how it works at college at UB, and I think there's some similarities. UB will put out their first depth chart of the season, and the coaches are involved with that. But then week to week, there'll be a weekly depth chart in the game notes, and that's put out by the sports information director, the athletic communications staff, without too much input from the coaches. And it changes kind of a week behind in the changes if the coaches want to make changes to the lineup, that happens in the game, and then they catch up on the depth chart a week before. So this just might be the assumed depth chart by Buffalo Bills PR. We might be, putting too much stock into who's where and thinking that the coaches have decided that, and this just might be, the best guess put together by whoever did the game notes.
Yeah, you're right. We don't know exactly who's doing it. And so don't read too much into it. Some of those guys might not even play. Some guys listed as starter might. I was just looking because I keep it here handy. And of course, I'm going to have a new one come Saturday. But I have the Bills depth chart here off to the left from the playoff game in Denver. Ed Oliver played in that game. He's not even on the depth chart. The defensive tackles are Deion Walker and Daquan Jones, and behind them are Larry Ogunjobi and TJ Sanders, and then Fedarian Mathis. So this is for a playoff game, and it's not accurate. And it doesn't necessarily mean that these guys did start. In fact, it lists 12 guys. Now that I think about it, it can't be accurate. So it doesn't even tell you. Of course, you can't necessarily put out your starting lineup, but for defense, because you don't know what set the Denver Broncos are going to start the game in. So do you go nickel, or do you have an extra D lineman in there? Whatever, an extra linebacker.
And the injuries
anyways.
and veteran players that get rested will scramble this depth chart as soon as the ball is kicked off.
That's right. Is there a player you're looking at, Jonah, or just anybody that you're excited to see? Caleb Elarms-Orr is getting a lot of run at linebacker, and being a rookie, I think facing some NFL action, it'll be good to see how he holds up, how he attacks, how he tackles, all that. Jim Leonard said that tackling is going to be what he's looking at the most because it was an Achilles heel for the Bills last year. I'm using Jim Leonard's words, which I think is interesting because they did sign the worst tackler in the NFL last year. They did sign him this offseason, Geno Stone, who missed 20. Let me call that up because I think I may have given those numbers wrong, but he missed an ungodly number of tackles. So on Pro Football Reference, they do give some advanced stats regarding tackles. They have Geno Stone as missing. Oh, come on now. Now, of course, it comes up Geno Smith. So let me do Geno Stone.
Well, while you're looking that up, I will say the safety position is something to watch because Cole Bishop and CJ Gardner-Johnson have not been practicing the last few days for most of this week, and we would presume aren't going to play, are still dealing with injuries. Damar Hamlin and Geno Stone were apparently in competition maybe for a roster spot, but now they could be the starting safeties next to each other in this game. And the Bills have safety depth, but they don't have a ton of safety depth. They did just re-sign a safety, but Damar Hamlin and Geno Stone might have to play first team and a bit of second team throughout the game. And maybe we'll see, Jalen Kilgore, I think, will play more in this preseason game than he might in the regular season or in a different type of role. And you might get to see some of his playmaking ability that the injuries have created, some more opportunities for the backup safeties.
Geno Stone missed 26 tackles last year. He made 104. So if you add those together, 26 divided by 130 attempts, he missed 20% of his attempted tackles last year. 20%. One out of every 5 tackles this guy tried to make, he failed to make. And at safety, woo, those are touchdowns or those are big gains. I mean, you better have a fast linebacker or your cornerbacks better be willing to chase people down from behind and make tackles. Cornerbacks, not all of them are. Not great. But anyway, that's one player. But I thought of him when I heard of when Jim Leonhard made the comment about how he was looking for guys who were going to make tackles on Saturday. I cut you off. So I mentioned the safety play. Anything on offense?
Offensively, I mean, from the casual Bills fan, NFL fan perspective, I think early in the game, you're going to want to keep your eye on DJ Moore. He's been the most outstanding player of the training camp, the newest important player on the Bills. And I do think that there may be some effort to throw the ball his way early in the game. I don't think he'll be in the game very long, but if you can kind of see him make a splash play in this preseason game, the way he's done in a lot of practices in the stadium practice, that'll be very exciting for the fans. Keon Coleman, he could make the very best play. He could drop a pass, kind of seeing how he handles the bright lights of the moment and things like that will be interesting to watch.
And the Carolina Panthers have a really good defense. So I think for Bills fans, you hope that the Panthers go put their ones against the Bills ones, and you can maybe just see a little bit. It's more scrimmage related or practice drill related because yes, these guys are going full go because they don't want to get hurt or because you can get hurt if you don't go full go. But in terms of play calling and things like that, it's going to be pretty straightforward. The routes that are being run, the concepts that are being deployed by Joe Brady on offense and Jim Leonhard on defense too. They're going to try some things. They're going to communicate and they're going to want to put themselves in some situations where they need to be stressed a little bit because that's the point of this. But it's not like the teams aren't going to be going full go. The players are going to be going full go, but the coaching staff and the whole game, it's not going to be the intensity and the game planning is not going to be there. The Bills coaching staff did not spend any time looking at Panthers defensive tape and saying, how can we beat these guys on Saturday? It's something that coaches rarely do. I do recall Chan Gailey doing it during one of his preseasons because the Bills were having trouble scoring touchdowns. And he did game plan for confidence purposes. One of the games he was like, yeah, we're trying to beat, I want to say it was the Steelers. And he was like, yeah, we need to find ways to score touchdowns and get these guys going. So yes, we are game planning and looking at film on the Steelers.
Joe Brady being his
Tyler
first
Bass.
game. Yeah, I mean, I do think it'll be kind of interesting, but I'm a little tired of some of the Tyler Bass discourse. We have seen him kick a bit. He is the only kicker on the roster. he's going to kick field goals. Everybody seems very like intrigued by what that looks like, what
Because
his
he's
follow
not
through
a
looks
no
like.
because he's not elite. He's not a no doubt. Like of all the guys that should be competing, maybe that's a position where the Bills could get better, right?
Yeah,
I
but they
mean, and
don't
you can
really have
find
the option right now. Maybe do you think the Bills, if Tyler Bass misses a kick in the preseason, do you think the Bills are going to release him and re-sign Matt Prater?
no, but it'll be a story.
Yeah.
It'll be if you're just from a fan standpoint of is our kicker ready, whether it be between the ears or his mechanics or whatever. But he hasn't made a meaningful kick since 2024, and he's coming off a sports hernia surgery, and even before then, he was pretty good, but he wasn't great. He wasn't, he made the 61 yarder to beat the Miami Dolphins, which was dramatic and broke a team record. But you got guys around the league kicking 67, 68, 70 yarders. Guys are getting better all the time at this position. And the Bills seem like they're happy to go with the guy who was really good 5 years ago. And
Yeah,
they're banking on him being good again.
I think the Bills are married to Tyler Bass contractually for at least another season, and Tyler Bass has proven to be an NFL capable kicker. You might make Bills fans nervous late in the season with some of the inconsistencies he's had, but he has the ability, and when healthy, should be a starting kicker in the NFL probably. If the Bills release him, I think another team would scoop him up rather quickly. Now there's the punter competition, which also is the de facto holder competition, and if Tyler Bass misses a field goal and maybe it was because of a bad hold, that could be something to pay attention to and analyze, if it plays out that way. Um, but if Tyler Bass makes his field goals and his kickoffs look pretty good, I'm not that interested in seeing what, the expected results of that experiment.
Yeah. So the incumbent, Mitch Wishnowsky, he's entering his 8th NFL season, or at least seasons in which he's played. I don't know if he's accrued other seasons on a practice squad or whatever the rules are there, but he has 8 actual game regular season experience, 8 seasons. He's going to make a lot more money than the rookie Tommy Doman, who the Bills used a draft pick on. They can save money there. So I think this is Tommy Doman's job to lose. And so if he doesn't dribble down his leg, he's probably going to be the punter. But yeah, we get a chance to see if he's going to dribble down his leg.
I'm
Else, Joan,
interested to
you know
see,
what?
this is through the
We made
course of
it.
the preseason.
Oh, sorry.
Well, I mean, Joe Brady, his sideline demeanor as the head coach, how he reacts in certain situations, even celebrating in good plays and things like that, how he balances being the offensive play caller and the head coach, at different times of the game. I don't think you'll be able to draw a lot of conclusions off one preseason game. It'll probably take most of the season to really figure out, how that dynamic is interplaying with the team and things like that. But your first opportunity to see what that looks like and how it presents itself comes this Saturday. And the stadium is still the biggest story with the Bills. How many of these issues that were raised after the open practice get resolved in 1 week? How many new issues maybe crop up, or how much it gets, I think, maybe corrected back towards, I think most Bills fans are very, very happy with the stadium, and maybe some of that sentiment will swing back and then drown out some of the complaints that came out of the first event.
All 3 stations handled the story aggressively. The Athletic wrote a story about it that I didn't expect when I woke up Monday morning, because Saturday, so I'm at the game the practice last Saturday, and I'm on the concourses before the practice and talking to fans, and it was virtually unanimous, the praise, the excitement, euphoria of this new stadium, and people who are seeing their seats for the first time and navigating their way around and getting lost on purpose. I mean, the place is cool to just, I'm going to wander around and see what I find. And literally the only negative feedback I heard, and I did hear it from 3 different fans. One guy stopped me. He was like, "Tim, you seem like you know what's going on around here." He recognized me from the podcast. And he's like, where can I find the bowling ball cups? Everybody wanted the different types of cups that you can get, the take home cups. And there's the bowling ball drink that pays tribute to the bowling ball shot from out in the tailgating, out in the parking lots. People had trouble finding that. So that was the only negative thing I heard. So I did a stand up after the game. The Wi-Fi there does suck. So that was my personal, or no, I take it back. My cell, I have AT&T. Sorry, AT&T. I know, and Verizon is the sponsor. I heard people who have Verizon were having trouble, but I was down to 1 bar or SOS at times with my cell signal at the stadium, but Wi-Fi was plentiful. So I was on the Wi-Fi. But anyway, because my cell signal was so low, and when your cell signal's low, your phone is working constantly. I didn't want to drain my battery. So I wasn't on social media Saturday night until I was done working. And then I started to see the obstructed view posts. And then I really saw them on Sunday. And I thought, well, I knew that, John Morrow, the Associated Press, his had gotten a clarification that that's not a seat for sale. So in my mind, I'm like, all right, this is kind of addressing itself. It's working itself out on social media. But then Monday, the furor was still there and maybe hotter than Sunday regarding the problem, people with complaints. But so it led the 6 o'clock news on all 3 stations. And everybody had its own reporting. I DVR all 3 of them. I wanted to watch because I'm a news junkie. And all 3 stations had different people with complaints. It wasn't a recycling of just the same 2 or 3 people. It was from the 400 level. It was from the 300 level. There was on Channel 4, they had somebody who was from the suites who said, it was a $20,000 PSL, and there's a bar that goes right across their line of sight. But you don't know where they're taking, what angle they're taking the photo from. Are they looking for clout? Are they looking for reclicks? Are they looking for engagement? Are they just trying to shock you by taking the photo? For those listening on the podcast, I'm pantomiming where you could take a photo from chest level, or you could take it from your actual sight line. You can move a foot to the left and see everything perfect. So anyways, you don't know exactly how accurate this is without sitting in the seat yourself and doing journalism, in-person journalism like that. But I thought it was striking to me that everybody was finding people with a different problem. And so anyway, from your standpoint, Jonah, I guess do you have from a journalism standpoint looking at it, or from just your observations of just the fan standpoint of this storyline that has emerged of the stadium, and the fact that it's not perfect really pissing people off?
I think you summed it up pretty well there, because it's not perfect, but it's wonderful. It's amazing. It's quite a structure to look at. It's brand new. I think the newest NFL stadium or the newest professional sports stadium is always going to be a state of the art and something to behold. And this is definitely the case. If you going to it for the first time or even the second or third time, I think you're going to be awed walking in and walking around and seeing all the details and what was done there. It's pretty amazing to kind of look across the street and see the old stadium no longer there and flattened into rubble, and then walk into this structure that was a hole in the ground 2 years ago and even was a hollow shell 1 year ago. And now it's pretty incredible what it is. And from the people I talked to directly, and even I overheard a lot as I was walking in and out and sitting in the parking lot, just fans talking among themselves about how amazing it was. I think the vast majority of fans who attended that stadium practice were rather impressed and really happy with what the stadium is, and even with, if they had to pay a lot to be in there, seemed to be pleased with the value they're getting for what they paid. Now, I think there's very fair criticisms from specific season ticket holders that purchased personal seat licenses if their view is different than what they were shown on renderings by the sales representatives, and that needs to be addressed. I think in some cases that I've seen, some of these obstructed views were indicated by the renderings, and it was known that, you might have a metal bar in the way, and then maybe it looks a little different in person than it did in a digital facsimile of that. And that's something that the Bills need to work out with, as Pete Gwelly says, the less than
Pass a
1%.
mile?
Well, is that the right word? I don't know, but I think it's,
Facsimile?
yeah, that's the word I meant. Yeah. But
All right.
maybe I just invented a new word, whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but back to the point, I do think when you take everything in the aggregate, the stadium is what, 10,000 seats less than it was across the street last year. It's almost 20,000 seats less than the max capacity of Rich Stadium at one point in time. I think Bills fans took a lot of pride in filling up an 80,000 seat stadium year after year. It helped with, well, it
Well, Ralph
lowered,
Wilson helped out with those a lot of times, right? To get the
well,
sellout, to get the game on
for
TV.
sure, but there were also plenty of times in the late 80s and early 90s when they did sell out every game with 82. And I think that the Bills had some pride that being a smaller market, they could have the biggest crowds in the NFL. There were attempts to set records for having the loudest crowd that they weren't able to do, but there was an effort to do that. So I think that in the ticket demand part of it, a bigger stadium will somewhat lower the ticket demand and have more single game tickets available, which aren't very much available right now, and things like that. So I think you factor that in with that. A lot of fans wanted the stadium downtown. A lot of fans and people wanted a roof on the stadium. Uh, you know, different things that are not meeting everybody's wants and needs and wish lists, and you roll them all together. And this was sold as the greatest stadium you'll ever see, and you will be
In the
so
downpour, it was heavily marketed as all these, not
right.
all the seats. Now, we don't need a dome. You're gonna love it just the way it is with the roof open, or we're gonna really mitigate it by covering 65% of the seats. Well, the downpour on Saturday night, and I will say that the stadium was not 65% full. The whatever, however many seats were supposed to be covered, people were running for the tunnels. There weren't a lot of people. Now, granted, okay, so let me pull the math back a little bit, because first off, it wasn't a capacity crowd. There were capacity tickets distributed, but only 51,000 showed up. So that's 10,000 seats that would be empty already. I did talk to a lot of people, and it did seem to track that some people were just showing up to see their seats, period, get a beer, walk around, and then leave because they didn't want to get stuck in the traffic or the fireworks crowd, all that. There's all kinds of reasons. So the place wasn't full when the rain came down. So to say 65%, but anyways, it was just a fraction of the people who were still undercover, it seemed like. They said 65%, and a lot of people got wet.
Yeah, with the way the wind was blowing, and if the wind still swirls around like it did at the old stadium, that's gonna everybody's gonna get wet or
Well, they also said
bothered by snow and wind and rain.
that's going to be alleviated too with the little
But was it?
air
Because I heard
holes.
some complaints that people said they could feel the wind. I also have heard some complaints. I mean, I'd have to be out there myself, and we'd have to go through some more windy days to really see how this works. But I've heard some reports that the way the wind regulator is structured to reduce the wind on the field for the game itself is funneling that wind into the concourses, and it's
Yes,
breezy in there.
I had a construction worker who was worked on the project warn me about that a couple of times. He says we're working on these concourses, and the outer shell was already up, and maybe not everything was in, but he was like, this is supposed to be closed off, and the wind is howling through this concourse. And yes, there's going to be heating out there too, but it's open. So in the winter, I think that if there are people who believe that their climate control issues are solved because of technology and advancements in architecture and the stadium design, I think probably as the weather gets colder, there's going to be some fans who are disappointed because you're sold on, and I'm not saying it's a bait and switch but I think you are just believing how amazing this stadium is that it's almost like the Joe Brady discussion with Sean McDermott, right? All the problems that we had at the Ralph are gone now. We're going to have this brand new stadium. They're talking about the canopy and how it's going to cover so many people, and there's going to be overhead heating, like there was just in the 200 level at the Ralph. Now it's going to be all over the place, and the concourses and the views, and this is going to, and anybody who did want a dome has been dealing with fans who are okay with the open air concept saying, hey man, just shut up. You don't need a dome. Everything's covered. I've even been reporting that, over the years, that was the sell from stadium builders, from the Bills themselves, is like, hey, this is going to be so much better. But I think so much better comes after a while. Should be perfect, because I'm paying PSLs and the cost of the tickets have gone up, and the taxpayer aspect of it, and the price tag. We see this price tag all along, 2.2 billion. And it's like, well, where is the 2.2 billion? Where's my 2.2? Where is it coming from? The 6% tax now that the 6% tax has been known about forever, but people are now seeing it on their receipts from the practice. So, but this 6% county tax on every sale made at the stadium, people are just like, well, where is the perfection? I want the perfection. And that's not to say that perfection should be genuinely expected, but I think that they're seeing the flaws as way bigger than they are, and they hit harder and they sting a little bit more.
Yeah, and it was hyped as a flawless structure or a flawless palace for
It should be
Bills
the
fans.
NFL's best stadium, at least until the next one opens, correct?
Yeah. Right.
It's in terms of
it might,
technological advancements and architectural design and all these things. At $2.2 billion, it should be the NFL's showpiece until Nashville or until whatever the next stadium. But it looks like it's, to me, again, I'm not shitting on the stadium at all. I love the stadium. I'm in awe. But to me, I think that the fan and people who are from here, let's say even the media who maybe don't travel, this isn't an average to above average NFL stadium. There are so many new stadiums. You go to, and you'd be like, well, Tim, come on. But I mean, Dallas is probably more impressive. SoFi Stadium's more impressive. So that's 3 teams right there. Atlanta, Minneapolis, there are stadiums that you would compare if you've been out and about that you'd say, well, more money, bigger markets. These are Super Bowl venues, more went into it. Okay. But this is kind of expected. Players know this. The media who travel know this. So being from Cleveland, to go from Municipal Stadium to the Cleveland Stadium that a lot of Bills fans have been to, whether it be for preseason games or regular season games, a lot of Bills fans have made that trip. And you walk into Cleveland Stadium and you would not say, oh my God. But when I saw that stadium for the first time, I thought, oh my God, because I'm from Cleveland. And it's not just what they had before. It's like, we never thought that this was ever possible, because they're always talking about a new stadium. And you've been hearing the discussions for 20 years about maybe a new stadium someday, or you want to go back even more years to when the Rich Stadium was first built and there could have been the Dome in West Seneca and all these things that never materialized. Finally, here's this thing. And the impact that you feel when you see it is visceral from your fandom, from your fact that you're from here, Western New York, and this is our pride. This is our thing. But in the grand scheme of things, it is not a super duper special stadium. It's great, and it's way better than the Ralph, and it's way better than a lot of stadiums. It doesn't have the charm of Lambeau, but it's probably, it's from all kinds of measures. You could say this stadium's better than Lambeau, and this, but is it better than Seattle? Is it better than, I'm trying to think. To me, it had felt like MetLife Stadium, which was built 20 years ago. The new Meadowlands Stadium, and it's still great, but it's kind of like, I don't know what point I was really trying to make there, other than I think that I just think that for people who are from Western New York and never thought this was possible, this hits as like you're awestruck at the concept. But if you've been in other NFL stadiums, it's like, yeah, cool. All right. They got a good stadium here. But I'm not dumbfounded by it.
Yeah, I don't think it needs to be the very best stadium, and how it compares to other individual stadiums in other markets doesn't matter to me as long as it's not like really substandard. It is the newest stadium and probably should push towards being the very best by nature of, being on the cutting edge and things like that. And if they cut corners with cost or whatnot to avoid that, that's no good, because it's going to be, you know, 30 years at least and probably much longer until they build a new stadium. But I do think it's near the top. I haven't seen as many stadiums as you do. But it does feel like what was the phrase you used? A super duper stadium. It does feel like it falls into that category, but specific to Western New York and the Buffalo Bills fans, it doesn't meet every fan need and wish and desire that existed when they were planning this stadium, or before it was built, before the first shovel was in the ground. And some of that, you can't meet every fan need and desire. It can't be perfect, but I think the aggregation of all the little areas where it comes up short or doesn't meet the hype creates this situation where it was a bit overhyped, where it doesn't measure up to the hype. And I think that's, unfortunate. And, we haven't even talked about the size of the video scoreboard, the sound system, which I think was something they're just working through, but it didn't sound great in game one.
I had discussions. I had a conference call that Monday with Bill's president of business operations, Pete Gwelly, and also John Polka. I want to get their titles on here because I'm trying to commit them to memory. So hopefully I can find that in here quickly in my notes. John Polka, he's the vice president of stadium development, and Andy Major, who is senior vice president of venue operations and fan experience. And we were on a conference call regarding all the different issues. And one of the things that they did mention regarding the audio, well, I'll just say both, the video too, but the audio it was a practice. So they had speakers on the field like they would for a practice, the music that the players want to listen to, the crowd noise that they like to have, because they want everything going. They want sound. They want the players to be surrounded by all that. And then in addition, the public address was trying to compete with that, and they were having trouble. And so, yeah, they were like, well, that's not going to happen for a game. And then the scoreboard aspect, a lot of people thought the scoreboards were small. They say that the scoreboards are the right size and they're happy with the size. What they need to do is probably use the video more, because they also have other content on these screens in addition to the video, like down and distance or stats or advertising or anything. And so they are going to tinker with that. So it probably felt smaller because of how they used it, but that they need to play with it a little bit to find out what the sweet spot is for the scoreboards.
Sure, but it's not as big and as visually striking as other scoreboards and other scoreboard shapes and styles that you see in other newer stadiums. It's not even as, it's a bigger venue, so by scale it might be the similar size, but it doesn't strike you nearly as much as the new scoreboard at the KeyBank Center and things like that. And if the scoreboard was bigger, you could have a bigger video with the content on the side.
Right.
And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong.
But then you're sacrificing seats. And you're sacrificing view, and you're you're blocking patio areas or the concourse, all these things that they really wanted to accentuate.
Right. I get all of this stuff. There's probably very valid reasons why the stadium is what it is. And I think it was very intelligently designed, or at least there was intelligent effort put into the design. But the point I'm trying to make is that when you add up all of these little things that might have valid rationalizations on their own, but when you put it all together, there's disappointments, and you put all of this time and energy and effort and money and anticipation and weight into the stadium, and if these little disappointments add up, it just, I think it leads to a big disappointment among the fan base. Now, having said all that, I don't think there's a big disappointment. I think that it's 90+%, amazement and some small disappointment. And some of these things are going to be worked out and won't be lingering through the regular season. But there's, the high school games won't be played there anymore. The lack of a roof limits some of the different type of indoor events that could be held there. The size, maybe they can't play baseball and some other different sports there. All of this added up, just makes it a little bit less than what everybody wanted or everybody would embrace. And so I don't think there should be some surprise that there's a little bit of backlash. I do think the backlash was overstated coming out of that first practice, especially from, I don't know how much of this you see yourself, but I saw a lot of it, like Instagram influencers who weren't there and they're just taking a social media post and commenting on it.
Yes. The same,
CNN did a
same
story
3 or
on
4
it.
photos.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't see CNN did it.
Yeah, I think that was because it went out nationally as if this Bills stadium is really a problem and the Bills fans hate it. And could you imagine paying a PSL and this is your view? And I think that was very misguided because most of the seats aren't obstructed. Many, many, many high percentage of the seats are not obstructed. And most people either, everybody paid a PSL, but not everybody paid a $20,000 PSL for a seat they're disappointed with. People in the 400s paid much, much less for their PSLs, and most people have a good seat. But you're coming out of a stadium across the street that did it have any obstructed views? They had that one seat where they put taquillo spikes the one day, but other than that, it was known for having tremendous sight lines, and you
And
could
that was
see the field
fudged
from
too.
anywhere.
Taquillo Spikes was trying to help out the alumni folks, and that was, I don't want to say it was I guess it was kind of staged, as I've learned at the time. I did a story on it. In fact, it was so important to the Bills that when I was looking for comment, they gave me Brandon Beane because they didn't want this reputation to affect football operations. The fact that a free agent might not want to come here if this is how they're treating their alumni. So it was an important thing when Taquillo Spikes took that photo. And I wanted to actually go up there and see it, and I wasn't allowed. And the Bills probably should have let me go up there and sit there because then I would have seen for myself that this was kind of loaded. This was if he'd have shifted his chair about a foot to the left, it would have been fine. But you're right. It's bad. I mean, the Bills cannot. A live NFL regular season snap cannot come soon enough for the Buffalo Bills. They have taken so many shots. I used this line the other day. It was an old saying my dad used to give. The Bills have taken so many rights, they're begging for a left. I mean, they have just been getting the shit kicked out of them. And everything from the Nickel City uniforms to the Terry Pagula news conference to O.J. Simpson to not getting a better wide receiver than DJ Moore just fill in the blank of all the things that have just been the steady drumbeat of, I'm sure, I know I'm leaving stuff out, but
The tailgating rules, which are
yes,
somehow the same as last year and somehow something that the fans hate. I haven't really squared where the middle is on that.
I think it might be just the fact that the Bills put it out. And maybe the Bills are saying we're going to enforce it the same. Yes, these have always been the rules, and we're going to wink, wink, enforce them as we have always. But it seemed like it was a little bit when you get a new set of rules, or that the rules are put out there in such a way, it seems a little more militant.
The traffic patterns that again are somehow the same but worse.
Right? People just I don't know. Oh well, PSLs have been going on for a couple of years, but still the PSL aspect of it, the peon practice, or the peasant practice, I should say they called it, the fact that you could not be a non-PSL holder and have as good a chance to attend the open practice as PSL holders, and the rift that went between the haves and the have-nots there.
I will
By
say
the
this.
way,
Well, let me just make this point real
yeah,
quick with PSLs and the 6% fee and the cost of concessions. And I believe this Action Network study was misguided, but the numbers that are out there, this will be the most expensive NFL stadium to attend a game
It's
at
a
this season.
snapshot of right now today.
Right. And I don't think that math is correct, but I do think there's some truth in that it is going to be a very expensive day at the football stadium this season for
Yeah.
Buffalo Bills fans compared to what they were used to before. But there should be no sticker shock whatsoever there because even long before this stadium was built, long before the planning for this stadium began, the need for a new stadium was presented to Buffalo Bills ownership that were slower. The NFL and Jerry Jones and Roger Goodell were telling the Bills they needed a stadium long before Bills ownership, whether it was Ralph Wilson or the Pagulas after him, came around to that idea. And it wasn't told that your football team needs a new stadium to play in, that, in order to win games and be competitive on the field. It's that you need a new entertainment complex to squeeze more money out of your fan base, that the current stadium you have is not enough of a revenue generator, and you need a new stadium, even though it's going to cost you $2.2 billion to build it, or cost different financing wings, all that money. But in the end, it's going to pull more and more money out of the economy and the entertainment dollars from your fan base. And it's been said all along that this stadium was being built as a means to take more money from the fans. So don't not be surprised in any way that this stadium is costing the average fan more money on game day.
And you raised a great point earlier, and I didn't expound on it, but it is activated a large group of fans who wanted a dome and wanted it downtown. And so they are looking at any reason, I think, to dunk on this stadium as I told you, or this is not what we should have paid for. This is stupid, especially from a weather standpoint. And going back to the PSL, non-PSL practice, there's a have and have nots dynamic that is developing here that I think is going to continue to grow. And I think that those who didn't pay for the PSLs have gleefully mocked those who did and got screwed with an obstructed view seat, at least in their mind. So I think they are kind of prolonging the discussion a bit of thinking it's hilarious that, hey, you paid for this seat, haha, and now you think you're special, but oh well, I guess I get to sit and watch it on my couch at home and have the grass. So there's, those who do go to the games and those who don't go to the games is fascinating to me. I was going to
There's
ask
also
you.
a segment of the fan base that would have preferred a full-scale renovation of the old stadium. And I understand why there are reasons why maybe that wasn't uh, possible, or financially responsible, but the fans kind of wanted to keep everything we love about the old stadium, the history, the character, the sight lines, the inner bowl, and just expand outside of that with the new concourses and the new amenities and things like that. And that wasn't the case, and that the new stadium doesn't kind of resemble the old stadium in many ways, leads to that disappointment. And one thing I'm disappointed at, and there's still time maybe to correct this, or maybe it's happening in ways that I don't see with my own eyes, but I'd like to see more preservation of some of the old stadium, a historical facade, if you will, to keep some of the tradition and the look and the feeling over there. I mean, the old rock pile was turned into a recreation sports facility, but when you drive by, it still kind of looks like an old stadium. And you're
They're
not getting that from the
Yeah,
stadium
they're
across the street right
keeping
now.
the administration building. Maybe they'll keep something, yeah, like where the 50-yard line was, or the lot. I don't know. Maybe they can put some stuff in the parking lot to, one more thing for one more place for fans to leave their empties. Um, I wanted to ask you why, because I did look it up in the dictionary, but I've been saying it because of this PSL, non-PSL, the haves and the have-nots. Shouldn't it be the haves and the haves-not, like
Sure. I mean,
brothers-in-law?
I thought you were looking up the pronunciation of facsimile. Um,
No, I know that.
the have and the have-nots.
The have
Yeah,
and the
you're right.
haves
Right, right.
not.
Yeah. Yeah, the haves is like the haves and the quarters and the fulls.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
To
don't know.
have and have not.
To have and have not.
Haves not. Anyways,
The haves
anything
not.
else we want to get at, Jonah, before we wrap it up and finally get to see a game in this new stadium tomorrow?
No, I think we covered a lot of different things, and hopefully we can, get back on next week and analyze that. And, UB football's underway. High school football starts Monday. We can get into maybe some of that discussion as the summer moves along and concludes, and we move into meteorological autumn.
I will be in Cleveland next week. That is my hometown. I get to stay with Mom, and I will be attending the practice and also the game. So I think we will be podcasting, or at least I will be podcasting from Cleveland next week. And are you going to the game? You've gone to Cleveland before.
I have gone before in different roles and different jobs. I have no intention of going next week, and at this
It's
point,
kind of a
not
nothing
credentialed.
game, but since I can stay with Mom, I think the Athletic generally doesn't cover road preseason games. Or send us on the road for the preseason. Of course, we would have a reporter there. We have a Cleveland reporter. So if anything happened with the Browns, he would jump, or with the Bills, he would jump on that. So we are staffed.
Maybe you could book a venue for a live TGAF podcast recording in Cleveland, and that'll give me a reason to shoot out there and scramble for a credential while I'm there.
Well, this does happen on the Baldwin Wallace, near the Baldwin Wallace campus. And how about this? The Bills just signed a guy from Baldwin Wallace. The first Baldwin Wallace player in the NFL, not counting the strike year in 1987, I think since the 60s. Now he played for the Tennessee Titans a couple of years ago. Anthony Kendall is his name. But Baldwin Wallace used to be a Division III powerhouse. Now it's a little more, it's just a pretty good, Mount Union really devastated the Ohio Athletic Conference and really Northeast Ohio. So a lot of the D3 players want to go to Mount Union. John Carroll's still really good. But taking a look at Baldwin Wallace, their last player was Tom Gooseby, 1966. Now they had a draft pick, and his name was Tom Graham. How about that? No relation. But he didn't play in a game until, and so they had Ed Schenk. He was a tight end who played as a strike breaker he played 3 games in 87. But then here you have Anthony Kendall, who spent 16 games with the Tennessee Titans as a rookie, and has bounced around the NFL on practice squads and stuff like that. He's now a Buffalo Bill, just in time to go to Berea, Ohio. So maybe the Baldwin Wallace community would like to welcome home 2 of its favorite alums, Tim Graham and Anthony Kendall.
Okay.
I don't know if Baldwin Wallace remembers me. I am listed on notable alumni on the Wikipedia page, though.
Yeah, I think you have maybe accomplished enough to get one of those honorary degrees if you didn't get your real degree.
I did. Sports management.
Nice.
Thought I was going to, I enrolled in Baldwin Wallace to work for a team someday, but switched my focus to journalism my freshman year.
Makes you well qualified to speak to my class at Villa Maria College that's in the sports management department, but it's about sports media, and one of the messages is how you can kind of blend the two, sport management and sport media skill sets, into a career.
Haven't I spoken to that class?
Yeah, you have.
Yeah,
but it's a different group of students every year.
Well, let's go. When's that happen?
We're less than 2 weeks away from the first week. I mean, guest speakers probably won't start until the second or third week of the preseason, but we'll get it going.
All right.
Hey, we'll do a live podcast from Villa Maria College.
Sure. I mean, we can even take sponsorship and trade. Just buy us a box of donuts and some coffees. That's enough to get me to we can go podcast on campus, do on site. We'll do a remote, as they say in the profession, in the biz.
I'm a little disappointed we didn't get to do our annual tradition of podcasting from different dorm rooms at St. John Fisher.
I think we've done that twice, right? Or once, maybe just once.
We've done it a couple times at least.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll have to get creative. Hey, help us get creative. Help support Tim Graham and friends through Homage. Go shop, go get some Star Wars, Marvel. I mean, I'm trying to think of other brands that I haven't mentioned already on this podcast. I mean, there's so many different ways to get your fandom on your apparel with all
Any
the different
Baldwin
crossovers.
Wallace t-shirts on that site? It is an Ohio.
It is, yeah, it's based in
Based
Columbus. WWE, did I say that earlier?
They got plenty of good wrestling shirts there. I've purchased
MLS.
many of them.
Well, we got legacy leagues. So you have the Negro leagues, all kinds of fun stuff. Oh, they have a Legends line. So you go, and these are just some of them, but they have Jackie Robinson, Babe Ruth, John Madden, Ken Griffey Jr., Jesse Owens, Billie Jean King, Larry Bird, and they just have they have all kinds of, anyways, I'm rambling. But anyway, support Tim Graham and friends through Homage, through the link that is either on the social media post or attached to this YouTube. And we can afford to go out and among the people and do some remotes.
We can go live from the Erie County Fair.
We're the only media outlet in Western New York that is not hasn't shown you how to make a pizza with an Oreo on it, or whatever. Not one of my favorite genres of local news is covering the fair. It is well,
I'll call that fair criticism.
Silly. I was trying to think of a diplomatic word.
I
think it is, and it's appropriately, and I guess I will say, pun intended, it is horseshit.
Well, I used the word silly in a newsroom email years ago and was not treated as if that was a diplomatic word. That was considered a very inflammatory word to use about our news coverage decisions. Yeah.
All right, Jonah, thanks for this. Thanks to everybody out there for watching and listening to Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK. Please follow us, like us, subscribe, rate, comment, all that stuff. We do appreciate our audience, and you guys have been great for sticking with us all this time. And as we continue for yet another NFL season.